So, for our last chapter this year, we're going to be talking about the importance of plants. So, we'll be looking at the role that plants play in everyday life, in our food, and in our ecosystems. So, plants play a very important role in our society. It's also really important to study them to understand how we can use plants for food and medicine and to help the ecosystem. The study of plants is called botany. The practical applications of botany are evident in agriculture, which is the raising of crops and livestock for food and other uses. So there are lots of, farms around here with different types of vegetables. Corn is a big one. Some of you might, live near places or have your own farm or gardens. So, that all plays a role in agriculture. Humans have cultivated plants for approximately 11,000 years and have changed, by selection, many plant species so that much of these plants can no longer survive in the wild. So if we look at a farm, a lot of the plants that we grow there, if we grew them out in the wild and had nobody there to take care of them, they probably wouldn't grow very well. So we've changed plants to make them more tasty, to make them grow in higher numbers in an amount of land, but some of those changes make it less likely for them to survive out in the wild. There are more than 350,000 different plant species. We use about 10,000 species for food. Believe it or not, only 20 species of plants provide about 90% of our food supply. This includes things like corn, which is a huge one, grains, wheat, rice, different types of fruits, beans, other types of vegetables. There's only about 20 plants or so that actually make up about 90% of our food supply. So that's pretty crazy to think about. 20 out of like 350,000 that we use the most. Food crops can be classified in many ways, including by their use and by their taxonomic classification, so what they're related to. Cereals, for example, these are going to be grasses that contain grains. So wheat would be a great example of a type of cereal. The major part of the human diet is provided by a few cereal crops in the grass family, especially corn, wheat, and rice. Grains are the edible, dry fruits of a cereal. Over half of the world's cultivated or farmed land is used to grow cereal crops such as rice, wheat, corn, and oats. Wheat and corn are produced in the largest amounts. These are going to be things that are used not only by themselves, but wheat and corn are used in other things like bread. Corn is used uh, as a sweetener in corn syrup for lots of different beverages and different types of things that we eat. So those are going to be two that are used the most in our diet. The United States is going to be the leading producer in corn due to our moderate climate. Our climate is set up nicely to grow corn, especially towards the middle of America, where that darker green color is. That's where most of the corn is going to be grown. But we know even over here in Pennsylvania, we have a pretty good climate to grow corn throughout much of the year. So that's going to be one of the reasons that makes corn so important to the United States is because we have the ability to grow large amounts of it. We use it not only for food, but we also use it in fuels. Ethanol, for example, we can use it as a fuel in our cars. So it's a really important crop that we have here. Root crops are roots or underground stems that are rich in carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, if you remember, are just examples of big types of sugars. So potatoes, carrots, radishes, rutabagas, turnips, sweet potatoes, those are all examples of root crops where the main part of the plant that you're going to be eating is going to be underground. And that's going to be where most of the carbohydrates or the energy is being stored. A lot of these things tend to be sweet or taste pretty good because of the carbohydrates that are stored there, a type of sugar. In many parts of the world, root crops such as potatoes and cassava substitute for cereals in providing the major part of the diet. So if you live in an area in the world where you can't grow types of cereal crops like corn and wheat and rice, a lot of times you can still grow root crops like potatoes, and those are going to be used as really one of the main parts of the diet in those areas. Legumes, these are going to be things like beans and peanuts, and they're members of the pea family and bear seeds in pods. So legumes are going to be important in agriculture because they improve nutrient content of the soil. So any type of bean and peanut that you might be eating, those are classified as legumes. It's important to note that everyday definitions of fruits and vegetables are different from scientific definitions. Scientifically speaking, a fruit is a part of a flowering plant that usually contains seeds. So, for example, apples, oranges, raspberries. A vegetable is derived from the leaves, stems, seeds, and roots of non-woody plants. So examples of vegetables would be like celery, lettuce, and broccoli. A nut is a dry, hard fruit that does not split open to release its seeds. Examples of nuts include almonds, walnuts, pecans, and hazelnuts. It's important to note that peanuts are actually not nuts. They are classified as legumes because they grow in pods, similar to peas. Nuts and legumes are higher in protein than other plant foods. So most plants don't have a lot of protein in them, but some of the ones that do include nuts and legumes like beans. So, you think about protein, you always think about meat and stuff like that, but also there are many plants that do contain a good amount of protein to build muscle and help build strong bodies. So those includes nuts, legumes, even things like rice. They contain a decent amount of protein in them. Other plants we use as spices, herbs, and flavorings. So other food crops that add variety and pleasure to our diet by flavoring our water, our beverages, and our food. What we call these spices and herbs. Spices, they usually come from plant parts other than the leaf and are tropical. Herbs usually come from the leaves and can be grown in gardens. My wife this year is growing a garden outside, and we're growing some herbs out there. So we're trying to, uh, you know, be good gardeners. Although some of our plants don't look like they're doing too well. I don't know if they're not getting enough sunlight or enough water, but some of them look like they could be doing better. But I think our garden might hang in there this year. Food production is really important. This is how we take everything that we're growing and we try to maximize it and feed as many people as we can. Several factors have increased food production, including the use of fertilizers and pesticides. A fertilizer, this is something that supplies plants with essential mineral nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. It helps plants grow better, quicker, help them grow more food. Pesticides, on the other hand, these are chemicals that kill undesirable organisms that harm crops, such as some insects. Now, when we use pesticides, we have to be careful because there are some harmful chemicals in there. Obviously, they kill some insects. We got to make sure that they're not unhealthy for the environment overall. We don't want to be killing the wrong insects or the wrong plants. We don't want them to be contaminating the water and making people and other animals sick. So we got to be careful when we use fertilizers and pesticides because they both can cause damage to the environment if we're not careful. Another thing to look at is over farming of land or overproduction of land. As land is cultivated to produce an adequate food supply, the health of the environment is compromised by soil erosion, depleted water supplies, and pollution. So there are some considerations to take when we're farming. We need to make sure that we're not using the same soil and the same pieces of land over and over again. We can make that soil unhealthy by farming on it every single year. Some farmers will farm on some part of their farm and grow food there for 1 year, and then the next year they'll use another part of their land. That's a smart way to go about it. We got to be careful with our water supplies. We know that there's only so much water on Earth that's available to us. Farming takes a lot of that water, so we got to make sure we're not wasteful. And like I said, with the fertilizers and the pesticides, we got to be careful with our pollution. We don't want fertilizers and pesticides to be running into our water, our creeks, our rivers, our streams. That could kill the fish, that could harm us, and anything else that might be drinking that water. So we have to be careful. We have to be smart about how we farm. There are also non-food uses of plants. One of the biggest includes medicines. Plants provide many important medicines, such as digitalis, quinine, morphine, and anti-cancer drugs. A lot of our medicines, I used to work in a pharmacy. A lot of our medicines have chemicals and ingredients in them that actually come from plants. So plants do give us a lot of important medicines here on Earth, and that's why we're concerned about losing plants, especially in like the tropical rainforest. There could be plants there that could provide medicines and cures to different diseases that we haven't even discovered yet. So plants are really important for that. Aspirin is one of the world's most widely used medicines. It originates from the white willow tree. It contains something called acetyl salicylic acid. So that is going to be one of the main actors in aspirin. This is used as a pain reliever and as a blood thinner to prevent heart attacks and strokes. Aspirin is one of the most commonly used drugs, medicines that plants give us. So that's just an example of how important plants can be for our lives. Many modern medicines either still come from plants or were originally obtained from plants and are now made in labs. Scientists are currently evaluating thousands of plant species for medicinal properties. One of the reasons scientists are concerned with the destruction of the rainforest is that many rainforest plant species have yet to be researched. New medicines and cures for diseases may never be discovered if the rainforests are destroyed. So that's once again, the reasons why we're so afraid of losing the rainforest. Not only all the animals there, but all the plant life too, and the things that we might be able to do with that plant life to help, our society survive. Here's just a little chart of some of the common types of medicines that come from plants. We already talked about aspirin. Codeine is another one that is in lots of like pain relievers. Digitalis is going to be a type of medicine that regulates a regular heartbeat. Ephedrine, this is going to be something that can relieve high blood pressure and symptoms of asthma and hay fever. So you can read down through these in your notes. Lots of important medicines that we do get from plants that people use every day, whether it's for minor aches and pains, colds, or more dangerous things that we use to help them with. We also use plants for clothing. Most of our clothes are made with cotton, which come from cotton fibers attached to the seed of the plant. Leather is made from animal hides treated with tannin, a chemical that comes from many tree species. So plants, not only do they give us food and medicine, but they help us with making clothes. Another important use of plants is as a fuel. Most of the energy that we use for heat, electricity, and fuel come from fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are composed of stored photosynthetic energy from millions of years ago. That's what most of the coal, oil, and natural gas is really made of. Ancient plants that died a long time ago. Grains can be fermented into alcohol and mixed with gasoline. This can make something called gasohol, which is made of about 10% alcohol and can be used as an alternative to fuel automobiles, cars. For other uses of plants, sometimes we use them just to make things look pretty, right? Ornamental plants improve the human environment in many ways. They can provide shade. They can minimize the erosion of soil, reduce noise, and lower home energy costs. Also, like I said, sometimes we just use plants to make the environment look pretty, to make our yard look pretty, to make the house look pretty, right? Flowers and plants come in many different colors, so many people like to use them to decorate as well. Some of that goes into mental health, making you feel better about the way things look. Plant ecology is the study of the interactions between plants and the environment. Plants play a major role with recycling in the Earth's water, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and inorganic nutrients. We talked earlier this year about all the different cycles that happen in our environment. Plants play a key role in pretty much all of them, so we need them to recycle things here on Earth. Plants and animals interact with each other in many ways. Plants provide animals with inorganic nutrients as well as organic nutrients. So they give animals some minor types of nutrients that they need, but also many things are plant eaters. They eat mostly plants, so they're a good food source for many things. Plants associate with animals in many mutually beneficial ways. For example, plants provide food to animals that protect them or carry their pollen. So pollination is a big example. We talked about with different types of insects and birds. They pollinate plants, they get food from the plants, but they also carry the pollen from one plant to another to help the plants with pollination. Plants also interact with microbes, very, very small organisms. For examples, most plant roots are going to be penetrated by beneficial mycorrhizal fungi, which greatly increase the root's ability to absorb inorganic nutrients. In return, the root supplies the fungus with energy. The roots of many plant species also form beneficial associations with bacteria. Some bacteria can take nitrogen gas from the air and convert it to a form that plants can use. We said that nitrogen is very important for plants, but plants can't really use nitrogen as a gas. They need it in a solid form. So many plants will grow with a bacteria that can take nitrogen gas and turn it into a solid form that plants can use to help them grow. Here is a couple pictures that show you fungi growing with plants. On our first picture up on the top left, we see some grass growing with mycorrhizal fungi below. We can see that root system below and the white showing us the roots growing with that fungus and how much surface area it takes. Those plants are going to get a lot more nutrients and a lot more water from the soil. The ones over to the right of it without the mycorrhizal fungi, you can see that there's not as much root growth and fungi underneath there. So those plants are not going to get as much nutrients and water from the soil. So those plants are not growing as well up on top. Another example down below as well. If we just looked at the root system of many plants, they'd be very, very simple and almost too small to help the plant grow all by itself. But since they grow with the fungi and they kind of expand that root system and help each other out, then these plants can grow a lot better and they can grow in a lot more areas around the world. Just a couple pictures to show you nitrogen-fixing bacteria. The first little picture on the left, it shows you where the nitrogen bacteria can grow with the roots underneath the plant. We can see an arrow pointing to that. That bacteria can take some of that nitrogen gas and turn it into a solid form for that plant to use. The picture over to the right shows you an actual picture of this nitrogen-fixing bacteria. You can see those little round little nodules, those little circles on the roots. Those are all clusters of bacteria that's going to help that plant get that nitrogen so that it can grow better. People have affected wild plant populations negatively by introducing foreign species of plants, animals, and disease organisms. Sometimes humans introduce, by accident, invasive species of plants that kind of crowd out and kick out other plants in the area, which could harm the environment. Weeds are undesirable plants that often crowd out crop plants or other native species. So you can even look around your house. There's probably some weeds growing up someplace where you might not want them. We have to go outside of my house and pull weeds a lot, and use some weed killers, lightly in some places to wipe some of them out. But weeds are an example of something that can grow out and crowd out other species of plants. There are also some harmful things that come from plants. Many deaths are caused by addictive plant products such as tobacco. So, cigarettes are an example of something that comes mostly from plants, a plant product, but it's killed, millions of people due to the different diseases and cancers that they can cause. Some plant species are also poisonous when eaten or touched. So sometimes, people might eat a plant that looks like it might taste good, but it might be poisonous and it could kill them. Other examples include things like poison ivy and poison oak. Although they might not kill you, they might give you really bad reactions on your skin. And, a lot of us have probably had poison ivy. You know how annoying and painful that could be. Millions of people suffer from allergies to pollen. So right now the pollen's getting pretty heavy outside with us moving into later spring, getting close to summertime now. A lot of us might be having allergies and different type of reactions to that. Hay fever is an allergic reaction that results in sneezing, a runny nose, and watering eyes. So those are some examples of some harmful things from plants. That wraps up our last chapter and actually wraps up our year. So you'll have a few questions about this PowerPoint for this week, and then you'll have some time to finish up anything that you might need to. I hope you guys have hung in there over the past couple months with this, and I hope you guys have a good summer. I look forward to seeing you back at the school in some form, hopefully, next year. Let me know if you have any questions. Take care.